Did you know that Battlefront 1 originally had all 6 classes? Each faction has 4 basic classes and 1 special unit, but in the BTS promotional video they clearly state that the game was meant to have
2 special classes,
proceeding to show off the unreleased Imperial Officer, Bothan Spy, and even the Phase 1 Red Clone Commander, which also had a yellow skinned variant without ARC Trooper gear but was later turned into the Clone Pilot. Since Magna Guards weren't created by the development of the first game, the CIS's commander unit was instead gonna be the standard B1 battle droid with a sonic blaster and an AoE skill buff move. But these were never officially seen until Battlefront 2. In fact, most other classes ended up staying largely the same, with slight differences. The Engineer class was instead called Pilots in the first game, and either had a grenade launcher that was eventually given to the Magna Guard, a shotgun for the Rebels, and in the case of the Clone Pilot, the Bolt Caster, which does no justice for the Dark Trooper since they just gave him a normal shotgun. So glad they changed this in the sequel. However, the Sniper class lost the best equipment in the game, being this recon drone that allowed you to call for an orbital strike. This was replaced with the auto turret, and the ability got completely removed in place for a self-destruct, which is much less cooler. Also, the Assault class for Battlefront 1 always came with 2 types of grenades. The standard thermal detonators and the concussion grenade, which does less damage to infantry but more to vehicles and droideka shields. Plus, clone trooper units replaced their thermal detonators with EMP grenades that send an electric shock instead of an explosion to more effectively take out droids. Both of these were sadly replaced in Battlefront 2 with just 4 standard thermal detonators for all assault classes, while giving the concussion grenades color to Gungans and other units in the hunt mode. Speaking of which, planets' native factions, usually identified by their yellow icons in the original Battlefront, also got changed. The first game allowed neutral factions their own command posts, acting as a third individual team on the field, attacking both sides. Even on the reused maps like Jabba's Palace, the Gamorrean guards could still capture command posts on their own, but this was eventually changed to having them infinitely spawn without the ability or need to capture bases. Or in the Tusken Raiders case, just moved exclusively to the hunt mode, though not much changed for the non-neutral planet native units, with the exception of the Naboo Guard, which was originally intended to fight with the Republic on Theed, and verse the CIS in Battlefront 2's hunt mode instead of the Gungans, but sadly this was never implemented. And heroes weren't even playable until Battlefront 2, only having Mace Windu and Count Dooku for the prequel era, plus Luke and Vader for the sequels. Not only were they overpowered, but literally couldn't be killed for some reason, which ruined a lot of moments. Thankfully, this was completely overhauled in the sequel. Battlefront 2 also shares a lot of maps from the first game, since they intended to have all of them carry over, but realized due to the game's differences in playstyle, some maps needed to be reworked or just cut out entirely. Especially when they included air vehicles, because for some reason they never implemented it in Battlefront 2 for ground battles, even when maps like Utapau are shown in the campaign cutscenes to have gunships, as well as other mission-specific objectives clearly involving these air vehicles, making some items on maps like the anti-air cannons on Megiddo and Kashyyyk feel out of place, and probably meant this feature was cut out very late in development from these maps. Which is also why they chose maps without this feature to make a return for Battlefront 2's DLC. Though, to be fair, airships were very overpowered, having ridiculous controllability and high damage, which is probably why they would have ruined the balancing of the game, resulting in them being exclusive to space battles. Still a shame since maps like Geonosis don't have as much of a massive scale when you can't use both the gunship and ATTE with your friends to take over the battlefield. Especially since you now can't just ride passenger in the gunship with this freaking amazing view. Well, at least until the AI inevitably derps out. But by far the worst feature that never made it into Battlefront 2 is the ability to go prone. I get the original's gameplay was much slower paced, not being able to sprint or roll forwards, but allowing the player to take cover on the ground would make for some of the funnest sniping moments, and add extra tension when sneaking into bases. But it was probably removed because the devs wanted to make sure players experienced more fast-paced gameplay with a lot of running around between objectives. Thankfully though, Battlefront 2 did carry over first person, well, at least for only soldiers. Vehicles are still locked in third person, which is a shame, but they did improve on how it looked from the first game, showing more of each unit's hands, which better highlights their unique traits. Especially for the Dark Trooper, since in both games he has this navy blue chrome armor, but in first person mode it changes to a very pale white, with armor that almost looks mechanical. Why is that? Well, find out in this video here.